Today, I'm going to talk about one of the most infamous games ever made. I speak of the notorious Duke Nukem Forever, a game promised and delayed more times than we can count. This game was in development for about 15 years. No other game in history took nearly as long as that. So why did this game take so long to make? Why was it delayed again and again and again? Well, sit back, grab a bag of popcorn, or a soda, or whatever you enjoy eating, and I'll tell you. First, some backstory about the company, 3D Realms. 3D Realms, originally under the name Apogee Software, was founded in 1987 by Scott Miller, later joined by George Broussard in 1990. They mainly released their games by shareware for a while, relying on others to release the games for them. Eventually, they wanted the title 3D Realms, since they wanted to connect whatever genre of game they would release with their title. Hence, 3D games, 3D Realms. Pretty simple. They also had an unused name, Pinball Wizards. Unused probably because there was never a need to use it, since they never made any pinball games. Now by 1998, all of their games were using 3D engines, so the name Apogee was dropped in favor of 3D Realms permanently. One of their most famous games to come out in the previous years was Duke Nukem 3D. Duke Nukem 3D was a first-person shooter, one of the most revolutionary ones at that. It was conceived around the time 3D Realms wanted to start making 3D games. They wanted to use a character that starred in two of their platform games before, Duke Nukem. With a game like this, they could flesh out his character more. Duke was made to be a macho, kick-butt, womanizing man inspired by 80s action heroes such as Arnold Schwarzenegger, John Wayne, and Clint Eastwood. With a budget of $300,000 and 8 to 13 workers, the game was completed in a year and a half, and was released in January of 1996. The game was successful, selling about 3.5 million copies and receiving good reviews. Though there was a lot of controversy regarding one aspect of the game. It was incredibly sexual. Without going into too much detail, let's just say that in today's world, the way it portrays women is, kinda questionable. However, people loved the game, and it was a success. So, the team naturally decided to start planning out a sequel, Duke Nukem Forever. After its initial conception after the release of Duke Nukem 3D, Duke Nukem Forever was announced on April 28, 1997, with plans to release no later than 1998 as a PC exclusive. However, soon after the team at 3D Realms, led by Broussard, started its development, the game engine they were using to develop it was made obsolete. They were using the Build engine, an engine which was also used to make Duke Nukem 3D and several other FPS games at the time. It rendered most graphics in 2D, but from the player's perspective, it was as if they were in a 3D world. It was a few months after development started that id Software, responsible for the innovative FPS games Doom and Wolfenstein 3D, had developed a far superior engine, the Quake II Engine. It was much more powerful in comparison to the Build engine, so Broussard decided that if they were going to make Duke Nukem Forever as good as they wanted it to be, they should upgrade to that engine, rather than developing their own engine. After paying a good chunk of money to license the engine, around $500,000, they got the rights to use it for Duke Nukem Forever. I'm gonna say Forever now instead of Duke Nukem Forever since it's shorter and you all know what I'm talking about. Anyway, because Duke Nukem 3D was such a success, Miller and Broussard were able to fund the game themselves, with GT Interactive handling publishing and marketing. The first ever screenshots of Forever appeared in PC Gamer magazine around August or September of 1997. Though fun fact, those were actually fabricated, since 3D Realms didn't actually get the Quake II engine until November of that year. Now people were getting excited for the game, and things were going relatively smooth for the team. If only they knew. Anyway, the first ever video footage of Forever appeared at 1998's E3 press conference. The trailer showed Duke fighting aliens on a moving truck. Critical reception of the trailer was pretty good, and it further increased people's anticipation of the game. However, Broussard, for whatever reason, wasn't too happy with the progress being made. However, a little bit after the Quake II engine was released, another eye-catching FPS engine was released, Epic Games' Unreal Engine. Not only was it technically superior to the Quake II engine, but it was better in terms of a lot of things, such as programming AI, rendering open spaces, collision detection, and other things. After E3, one programmer suggested that the team switch engines again, this time to the Unreal Engine. There were many discussions and debates regarding if they should make the switch or not, but eventually they unanimously decided to make the switch. However, this came at the cost of scrapping a good chunk of what already had been developed, since it probably wasn't possible to transfer the data. Great idea, guys. You waste a lot of money to switch to this awesome game engine, and then right after you do it again. After the Switch was announced in June of 1998, Bruce had promised fans not to worry about significant delays, stating that it would take about 4 to 6 weeks to get them back to the point in which they were at around E3, and no content from the trailer would be scrapped. He also promised a 1999 release date. However, he was exaggerating. A lot. 1999 came and went, and Forever was hardly anywhere around completion. In fact, most weapons were still concepts. Now isn't that great? Around this time, the team switched engines yet again to a slightly updated version of the Unreal Engine to help with the game's multiplayer mode. But another reason why the game was taking so long to produce was because of the things Bruce would want to add. A running joke at 3D Realms at the time was to not let him see any newly released games at the time, so he wouldn't want to incorporate whatever gameplay style he would see into Forever. I guess he never understood the definition of knowing when to stop. Meanwhile, the publisher, GT Interactive, was facing financial losses. It was later purchased by Infogrames Entertainment, and publishing of Forever passed to Gathering of Developers. The game still wasn't out by 2001, but what did come is a full-length trailer showing that the game still existed. Once again, many were impressed by the trailer, and they were anxious to see a finished product. 3D Realms even released a few Christmas cards promising the game's release. But even now, Bruce still didn't have a finished product in mind. Okay, here's a tip. I have programmed before, and generally, you're going to want to have some idea about what your finished product is going to look like at the very latest, at the mark of completing a third of it. Anyway, on top of all this, the publishing rights shifted once again, this time to Gathering of Developers' parent company, Take-Two Interactive, following the death of one of Gathering of Developers' co-founders and some financial issues. By 2002, 3D Realms hired several new programmers to help them continue development. They decided to develop a new engine rather than switch to an already existing engine. I imagine this was because the Unreal Engine was becoming obsolete at this point. This came at the cost of once again scrapping 95% of their work, as this was the fourth engine change since the game began. Okay, at this point, I'm sure 3D Realms just liked throwing everything they had away just to be like the cool kids, and not being a little behind on technology just for the sake of fitting in. Remember kids, you don't need to be cool to be cool. That made no sense whatsoever. Anyway, by the next year, 2003, only 18 people at 3D Realms were working on Forever. A former employee was quoted saying that Broussard was still operating on a 1995 mentality, where games had small budgets and teams. But this did have a few advantages, however. Since Broussard and Miller were funding the project on their own, they were able to ignore pressure from the publisher. But I guess at this point, they were just ignoring the anxious fans of the game, who were approaching the 6-year mark of waiting at this point. Take-Two later reported that year that the game wouldn't be done by then, and they predicted a late 2004 or early 2005 release. In 2004, rumors of the game switching engines yet again surfaced, thanks to GameSpot. They claimed that it switched to either the Doom 3 or the Quake III engine. However, this rumor was eventually claimed to be false by Broussard himself, which is good because I would have lost even more faith in them if they switched again. All that changed was the game's physics engine. This new engine was developed by a relatively unknown Swedish company called Mekon. Not Mekon, they aren't the main enemies from Xenoblade Chronicles. Apparently, it would be a step up from games like Half-Life 2. Impressive. There were also rumors of the game being shown at E3 2005, which it never did. Nor did the game make its late 2004 or early 2005 release date. Wow, these guys sure do keep their promises. Throughout 2006, much information about Forever was hidden from the public eye. Not much of the game was shown at all. Most of what was happening was going on behind the scenes. Now Broussard claimed to be finishing up the project, just pulling things together, trying to make it fun instead. Take-Two later was negotiating deals with 3D Realms. They told them that they would give them a $500,000 bonus in addition to $4.25 million at release instead of the originally planned $6 million, if they were able to finish the game by the end of 2006. This never happened. Also during 2006, the staff was starting to shrink. Many of the workers were tired of being on the team for years and working on the same game. This gave them very little to put on their resume. Plus, their payments were hinged on profit sharing after release. By the end of August 2006, 7 to 10 people left the team. Smart people, they finally caught on to what was happening. and I really don't blame them for leaving. Now fans once again worried about the game taking longer to make, but 3D Realms once again assured them that it wouldn't change much. Liars. Ugh. I really need to get that cough checked out. A new creative developer was hired in 2007. His name was Raphael von Lierop. A truly brave man he was. He played through the completed demo and was pleased. More of the game was done than he thought. He felt that they could push the game out and it would be good. However, Broussard still felt that the game was 2 years away from completion, because at this point, 2 years to him is like a week. Also in the summer of 2007, a new teaser trailer was released, which was the first real look at the game in about 6 years. People got excited again, and there was more publicity for the game, with it truly being almost done. Keyword here, almost. Though again, nothing at E3 2008. Things were going well, until yet another problem. In 2009, funding for the game began to dry up. Broussard and Miller had sunk over $20 million out of their own pocket into the game, so they asked Take-Two for another $6 million to finish the game. Though initially agreeing, they later declined and made a counteroffer, $2.5 million up front and another $2.5 million at completion. Broussard could not accept the offer, which meant he could not keep up with development. On May 6, 2009, the game's development was suspended indefinitely. The team was laid off 2 days later, and 3D Realms was reported to have gone under. However, they could still technically operate as a very small company. Yeah, I don't get it either, but that didn't stop Take-Two from filing a lawsuit against them for failing to complete the game. Without going into too much detail, what ended up happening was that it was settled when Miller clarified that the game hadn't been cancelled, just suspended, and that the game could still happen. And he certainly wasn't wrong, for better or worse. Though 3D Realms was gone, 9 ex-employees of the game continued development from their homes. They later went on to become an independent studio called Triptych Games. Just as a side note, I love how these studios put games in their company name, then they make like one game which either no one has ever heard of or everyone loves. Anyway, Triptych Games also happen to share the same building as the well-known game company Gearbox, primarily famous for Borderlands. The team decided to ask Gearbox if they could assist them with the game and help finish it up. The CEO of Gearbox, Randy Pitchford, actually used to work for 3D Realms and helped out with Duke Nukem 3D and Forever before founding it. He didn't want the game to die, so he approved and they helped. Then went on to notify the publishers of their assistance of the project and that the game would be out in time. Gearbox even got Piranha Games support to Xbox 360 and PS3 and added a multiplayer mode. The game was re-announced at the Penny Arcade Expo in 2010, and there was a playable demo of the game for the first time. Lines were reported to be 4 hours long. The game also had a final release date, May 3rd, 2011 in the United States, and May 6th internationally. But they delayed it one more time, to June 14th in the United States and June 10th internationally. But at this point, I'm willing to assume fans weren't upset by this, since a month at this point to them meant nothing compared to 14 years. But come those days, Duke Nukem Forever was finally released after 15 years of conception, development, conflict, publishing, licensing, and a bunch of other things. And what did people think of it? Yeah, reception wasn't too great. In addition to having clunky controls and stupid long loading times on consoles, the game was disliked overall. Even most longtime Duke Nukem fans hated the game, since it lacked many elements that had made Duke Nukem 3D fun, and some said it was just Duke Nukem copying Call of Duty. The worst part, however, was the portrayal of women. It is so offensive it's not even funny. Especially this one level, where I kid you not, you have to kill women being raped by aliens to prevent more aliens from spawning. Just take that in. Stuff like that might have been acceptable in the late 90s since 3D did similar things, but Forever came out in 2011. The world had evolved by then. We now have more girls who are gamers, and the whole macho kick-butt action hero thing had just died out. But granted, there are still some people who enjoy the game. Kudos to them. Some DLC was also released in the coming months, but nothing else major to report. As for the future of Duke Nukem, Gearbox is now the owner of the IP, so they would be the ones to make new games for the Duke Nukem series. At one point during Forever's development, there were thoughts on making a game called Duke Begins, which I imagine would tell Duke's origin story. He did also have lots of spin-off games being released while Duke Nukem Forever was being developed. It apparently was profitable for the companies, however, given the mostly poor reception, a new Duke Nukem game at this point I'd say is pretty doubtful. But who knows what the future has in store for him. It could be good, it could be bad. Thank you very much for watching this video, and have a good day.